What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fifth album by R&B artist R. Kelly. Basically, this project is called Chocolate Factory, and it came out in the winter of 2003. The thing about this particular product is this project came out when R. Kelly was pretty ubiquitous in the R&B sound as far as that pitch kind of particularly happened. There weren't a ton of folks that were kind of dominant in R&B around this particular time. You had a little bit of Genuine left over. Omarion was kind of popular. B2K was somewhat popular around this time, but for the most part, in terms of like a widespread, this can continue in terms of like a widespread kind of continual dominant factor in R&B in the early 2000s. R. Kelly was pretty much like the de facto one to kind of be able to have around this particular time. Usher was kind of having an off year. He kind of took off 2002 and 2003. Folks like T-Pain and Akon weren't around yet and some pitches like that. Nate Dogg did drop an album around this time, but he kind of was low key with it. It was kind of it just wasn't quite as widespread as he was in like the 90s, I'd have to say. So it's kind of the concept. So R. Kelly had a big year. This is probably one of R. Kelly's biggest years here, I'd have to say. Between 2003, 2004, 2005, R. Kelly was definitely a dominant factor and did a lot of damage despite all the controversy that he had just with the various problems that he had throughout the times of like the 90s and 2000s between like the Aaliyah situation and other situations just in the early 2000s. It was just kind of the concept of that particularly kind of happened. But this is still a relatively good album. It's not going to get a super high score in pitches like that, but I would have to say there's definitely some irresistible songs on here that have a lot of addictive appeal. I'd have to say in this overall, it's a pretty thrilling R&B type project. This is definitely a pretty essential project. I will give it credit to the fact that this is a essential project here that has more slow songs than probably necessary, I'd have to say, but it's just the concept of just having a more inward kind of focused type atmosphere as far as that particular kind of goes. If you're just feeling a lot more romantic and pitches like that, this album's going to win over more than the actual concept of it. Now, sometimes I'm still going to give this project like a relatively low score, but the fact of the matter is I would raise the score if these slower songs on here connected more full blown widespread, because the appeal of some of these, it's not like these are bad produced and the melodies and some of these are just not good. It's just kind of the concept that it's just the slower type mood and overall morale of this particular project is just more in like, I mean, this came out around winter, Valentine's Day type pitches like that. I'd have to say it's just kind of the concept. There are some decent bops on here, but apart from Ignition remix and maybe Snake, for the most part, the bounce on this particular project is pretty minimal. This is more in like vintage kind of 90s R&B, where you'd get like one hit single that was like a dance song and everything else would just be ballads and stuff like that. This is kind of a transactionary stage. This is before Beyonce kind of helped change the landscape with Dangerously in Love and some of those type pitches, when R&B artists would get to like the fourth single and pitches like that on their album's fourth and fifth single. This is before Usher's Confession, some of those type pitches, Akon's Trouble, some of those type ones that I just say in particular. So R. Kelly still was one of the dominant factors, but it's just kind of the concept that a lot of these are just pretty soulful. Now this is, like I said, this is a romantic album. It wins in that sort of aspect as far as that particular one it goes. But if you're not really in the mood for like more slow jams and pitches like that, just more central kind of slow jam type pitch, it just doesn't win us over as much. So I'd have to say that. But yeah, there were 3 singles on here. 2 out of 3 of them have some dance bounce about them. I feel like a lot of these probably got plays on like VH1, BET, and MTV, some of those type pitches, I'd have to say. Basically, the first single is Ignition remix. Now, this is a pretty classic R&B type song. I'd have to say in particular, definitely classic 2000 song. One of the bigger songs out of the first half of the 2000s in the R&B fold. I'd have to say this is before Usher's dominant factor between like the mid-late 2000s. But this is like a snazzy kind of classic 2000s R&B gem. I'd have to say in particular, it's definitely like an easygoing and kind of breezy night venue hitter. I'd have to say in particular, and this just has a catchy chorus about it, and the song is just red hot. I'd have to say. So I definitely appreciate the concept of this one in particular. I'd have to suppose it's an excellent type concept to kind of get here. This is the defining song for R. Kelly and just did a lot of damage for it as far as that particular kind of goes. Just the aspect of how some of this worked in particular is just pretty high grade. This would have to say amongst that particular aspect, just a good appeal of this one. There definitely need to be way more songs like this. I was very surprised that R. Kelly just didn't pack this album full of more hits like Ignition remix. Now this particular song exceeds the original. There are a couple of songs on this particular album, Step in the Name of Love and Ignition, that both have like 2 remixes on here, or not 2, but they have the original version, the remix. And on both versions of these particular songs, I only wind up liking one version of them. So I like the Ignition remix, but I like Step in the Name of Love, the original version. So it's just kind of the concept. So that's another reason to slash the score a little bit in terms of like the complaints about it, just because there really would only be 15 songs instead of 17, just slashing like the 2 remixes on here as far as that particular kind of goes, or the 2 different variations. But Ignition remix is definitely a red hot type song, definitely a defining song out of the early 2000s in R&B, I'd have to say. So definitely a real catchy chorus. Snake is the second single. This is a pretty nice one as well. This is like a great follow-up single to Ignition, I would have to say in particular. Just a real good balance of one, I'd have to say. It's like a good 1-2 punch, I would have to say, with that particular song. Ignition remix and Snake are just a great 1-2 punch to kind of have for this particular fanfare. Definitely, it's kind of a misnomer for this particular album because there's not many songs like these two songs, but I still would have to say it's a great 1-2 punch to kind of have, but that's about all that's really on this particular project. It's just that brief kind of 1-2 punch as far as that kind of goes. Not to say this is a horrid album, it's just in a different pitch most of this album. This is like a stellar kind of exotic beat that this is like a stellar exotic beat that this song particularly kind of has, and the dance vibes of this particular song fit pretty damn well, I'd have to say. So it's definitely a pretty great one, I'd have to say. It's kind of an underrated R. Kelly song nowadays, I'd have to say. It's kind of a forgotten about type one, I'd have to say, in today's pitch, probably just due to all the controversy and pitches like that. But this used to be a pretty highlight type hit back in the day, I'd say. This is a good one to kind of get some airplay here. Great song to kind of dance to, pitches like that. Nice real R&B romantic type snap to kind of have, and like a little bit more electricity towards it. So it's definitely a real nice one. Once again, probably needed more songs like this song as well, I'd have to say. Just some good, decent bops, some good, pretty superb bops on here to kind of get. And then Step in the Name of Love is the third single. This is another nice one. This is another top 10 type single. Ignition remix, I want to say hit like #1 or #2. Pretty close. Definitely top 3 single that Ignition remix was, and Snake was like a top 20 song. But Step in the Name of Love is like a bleary kind of winter brush of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a relatively tame kind of soul vibes that this song particularly kind of has. This song just has a minty feel about it. I'd have to say in particular, real nice crispness about it. I'd have to say, and this is just some nice makeshift to kind of have. So this is kind of like a car groove to kind of have. It's some R&B snap in like the winter time as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens. Just autumn winter type vibes. It's real nice car makeshift, workship type vibes. So just afterthoughts of just got done with work, some of those type pitches, the initial kind of hangout, just some hangout type fare with bass, some of those type pitches in particular. It's just a real nice, underappreciated, once again, another underappreciated kind of R&B type song for early 2000s type fare. I'd say just some good overall appeal that this song particularly kind of has. It's a real nice one to kind of get. This is a ballad that actually works in a single format. So applause to R. Kelly for being able to nail a ballad and be able to do it. This actually was top 10 single and had pretty good appeal. Now, I don't recommend the remix because that one's over 7 minutes, but I do recommend the original type one. This just had a lot of appeal towards it, and this is probably a pretty favorable R. Kelly song to kind of get just off this particular album. I mean, once again, the singles are the best part of this particular album, just in particular. There's not too many album cuts on here that really have that same jive with these 3 songs. It's just a pretty good pitch. So, but yeah, there's kind of a bloated 17 songs on this particular album, I'd have to say. And out of those 17 songs, I wound up recommending 5. So that's kind of the concept here, just being able to say that. So the 5 songs I recommend on here would be Ignition Remix, Snake, Step in the Name of Love, You Knock Me Out, and Who's That. So that's kind of the concept about some of these. Bunch of songs on here that I don't recommend, but I would almost narrow it down to 15 songs just because Ignition is basically about the same song as Ignition is about the same song as Ignition remix, I'd have to say, and Step in the Name of Love remix is about the same song as Step in the Name of Love, just a worse version of it. I feel like the remix is the one that you don't need just because it's over 7 minutes. So that's this kind of concept. So basically saying 5 out of 15, that's about a third of the project I'd have to say. So just to talk about some of these ones I didn't recommend. Actually, we'll talk about the 2 songs I do recommend on here. We'll talk about You Knock Me Out, which is one of the few other songs that's a highlight on this particular album. This is basically like a jivey kind of rhythmic gem, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a retro kind of soulful feel that this song particularly kind of has with like a 70s, 80s similar type vibe about it in particular. I'd have to say this song has a real catchy beat and groove overall about it. Pretty nice mid-pace type one, just kind of get just a real nice round the house type one, just kind of have. I mean, this could almost be like a dance club, but this is like such a basic kind of groove about it. Just really like a toe tapper type one, just kind of get in particular. Just a basic kind of rhythmic type one, not really like a dance jam like Ignition or Snake or some of those type ones, or Who's That, the other song I recommend on here, but it's just a good concept. Kind of have this one in particular, just a real romantic type one, just really feisty type one to kind of get, or at least a spicy type one, just real atmospheric type one. R. Kelly definitely needed more songs like this too. This would have been a pretty good pitch to have had a few more songs. Most of this is pretty central, like I was saying, but we'll get to that in a moment. But another pretty good highlight on here would be Who's That? This has Fat Joe on here. It's a pretty good pitch for that. It's like a refreshing kind of album cut, I'd have to say in particular. This song has balance and it's more or less. This is like a more electric version of Snake, I'd have to say in particular, and this is just some good pool party type music, I'd have to say. This is definitely like a good for like spring break type stuff, pitches like that. I have to say some Mardi Gras type music is stuff to listen to in late March as like spring starting to happen in early April, some of those type pitches, just near water and some of those type pitches, I'd have to say. pretty good concept. We get that in particular. Fat Joe suits this song. It's an overall good concept. You know, there used to be a lot of spring break type songs in like the early 2000s. It seems like they don't do that as much nowadays, but it's just a pretty good pitch to get some of these just in particular as far as that kind of goes. R. Kelly did a pretty good job with that. So that's the concept about this particular album. But there's definitely some ones on here. Talk about the complaints about this particular project. There's just a lot of songs on here. Plenty of these to name, like Heart of a Woman, I'll Never Leave, Imagine That, Forevermore, Dream Girl, some of these type ones, Forever, You Made Me Love You, that just really have like that slow type appeal of it. I mean, I feel like for the like the most romantic sense of like the occasion, I would look after that some of these do have their appeal towards it, but it's just the concept that it really is kind of starry eyed just within the aspect of kind of having it that way. I just would have to say it's a good concept for that sort of aspect, but just within the aspect of just kind of being in terms of not being as glitzy and like the shell shock or romance, it doesn't really have as much full blown appeal. I'd say, and a lot of these, just listening to them in a normal fashion, they don't really contribute to much in terms of like the aspect of really stepping out or having like some good weekend appeal. I feel like the two best moments I'd have to say in particular would probably be Ignition Remix and Snake. Now this is like some good Bay type music, relationship type music. I'd have to say in particular some great concepts for that, especially in the winter time as far as that pitch change goes with some of those particular aspects. But this kind of concept that this is a pretty slow album and this is basically that's just the concept is just really kind of like feeding strawberries, kind of just sluggish, kind of just sensual typeness that kind of goes along with it. Just the romance kick of is pretty turned up pretty high on this particular album, but it's just that's the concept of it. So I'm not gonna knock this album horribly because I do like the concept of some of these. It's just kind of concept that it just doesn't like this is a pretty limp album for the most part. I mean, really, there's probably about three or four, maybe even five more ballads and sensual type songs more than there probably should be on this particular album. I definitely think. Now I realize that this was kind of in an earlier fashion for R&B as far as that particularly kind of goes, when you would only get like one or two dance songs, and you really most R&B albums weren't getting to like the third or fourth single, some of those type pitches. But this is kind of a relatively revolutionary album. I feel like R. Kelly's Chocolate Factory is one of the ones responsible in addition to Beyonce and Omarion and B2K and some of those type folks that help kind of craft like more electric kind of neo soul and pitches like that throughout the 2000s, stuff like Usher's Confessions and Akon and some of those type folks that I have to say. It's just kind of the concept that the initial formation of some of that type of stuff was still kind of dicey, I'd have to say. So I'm going to score this out, me basically recommending 5 songs out of 15 or 17 if we slash the remixes or just count the full album. I would have to say I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 4.25 out of 10. Now, I definitely give it an E for effort in terms of the atmosphere, as being able to say that it definitely did damage. The singles are red hot, pitches like that, has some good appeal, some great melodies on here, some excellent choruses, some stuff like that. Just the overall appeal of these particular songs that are good really stands out in a lot of ways. Just kind of concept there's just not enough to go around, I'd have to say. So that's kind of the thing about it. The social score though, I'll probably give the social score like a 6.75 out of 10 because I definitely feel like a lot of these have some pretty good balance about them. It's just the concept, like I said, this is a pretty romantic album. There are some good weekend moments, like Ignition was like a top two, top three single, something like that. R. Kelly got like three top 20 singles, I'd have to say in particular, and some good moments just for like the concept of some step out type fare. And I also feel like Who's That's a pretty good pool party type song apart. And just on top of that, I'd have to say so some good concepts on here, good romantic type album to kind of get. The social appeal definitely is higher than the actual quality of this particular music for the most part. The singles are all great, but it's just kind of the concept that you may find this a little bit underhanded, I'd have to say. But that's kind of the concept. But in terms of the future, like R. Kelly has been in prison since at least 2019 or 2020, I'd have to say, and it looks like he's not getting out anytime soon. He's had some controversy. There's like a documentary that came out that really depicted all the stuff that he did and stuff. I'd have to say I'm probably going to get to some more R. Kelly projects. I'd have to say there's definitely some other good ones I'd have to suppose. This one is still worth looking into. I would still fuck with this project somewhat. Just just be more. I would just have to say to be more mindful, like the concept of the controversy when paying attention to it. If like folks, just the romantic interests are not as full blown sold on like the music that he's been putting out. That's just kind of the concept about it. But this is some excellent type stuff to kind of get here. I just would have to suppose in particular, it's not excellent in terms of the full blown score that I would give this album, but there are some good songs on here that still warrant giving this a whirl in certain fashions, I'd have to say.